Bonjour, French 2 students. Here is your teaching video for Lesson 20, Parts A and B, pages 284 to 291 in your textbook. S'il vous plaît, ouvrez vos livres à la page 284. Leçon 20. Alice a un job. Alice a un nouveau job. Elle travaille dans un magasin de matériel audiovisuel. Dans ce magasin, on vend toutes sortes de choses. Des baladeurs, des chaînes hi-fi, des radiocassettes CD, des lecteurs de DVD. Un jour, son cousin Jérôme lui rend visite. Salut, ça va? Oui, ça va. Et ce nouveau job? C'est super. Qu'est-ce qu'on vend dans ton magasin? Eh bien, tu vois, on vend toutes sortes de matériaux audiovisuels. Moi, je vends des mini-chaînes. Tu es bien payé? Non, on n'est pas très bien payé, mais on a des réductions sur l'équipement stéréo et sur les CD et les DVD. Qu'est-ce que tu vas faire avec ton argent? Je ne sais pas. J'ai envie de voyager cet été. Tu as de la chance. Moi aussi, j'ai envie de voyager, mais je n'ai pas d'argent. Écoute, Jérôme, si tu as besoin d'argent, fais comme moi. Comment? Cherche un job. So working through the translation here, right? The title is Alice Has a Job. Alice has a new job. She is working in a audiovisual materials store. In this store, one sells all sorts of things. CD players, stereos, boom boxes, DVD players. One day, her cousin Jerome comes to visit her. Hi, how are you? Yes, I'm fine. And this new job? It's super. What does one sell in your store? Well, you see, we sell all sorts of audiovisual materials. Me? I sell stereos. Are you well paid? No, one is not very well paid, but one gets reductions on stereo equipment and on CDs and DVDs. So by reductions, they kind of mean like a discount. What are you going to do with your money? I don't know. I feel like traveling this summer. You are lucky. Me too. I feel like traveling, but I don't have any money. Listen, Jerome, if you need money, do as I do. What? Find a job. L'argent des jeunes. Contrairement à beaucoup de jeunes américains, les jeunes français n'ont pas de travail régulier. Par exemple, ils ne travaillent pas dans les supermarchés, les boutiques ou les stations-service. Occasionnellement, ils font des petits jobs avec ou pour leurs voisins, babysitting, promenade de chiens, lavage de voitures, etc. En général, ils dépendent de la générosité de leurs parents pour leur argent. Le montant qu'ils reçoivent varie avec l'âge, les réseaux scolaires et la situation économique de la famille. Ils reçoivent aussi de l'argent de leur famille et de leurs parents et marraines pour des occasions spéciales. Noël, jour de l'an et anniversaire. Voici combien d'argent les gens français ont en moyenne. Âge en montant par mois. 2 à 7 ans, 5 euros. 4 à 14 ans, 15 euros. 15 à 17 ans, 100 euros. So, young people's money. Contrary to a lot of young Americans, young French people do not have regular work or do not work regularly. For example, they don't work in supermarkets, stores, or service stations. Occasionally, they do small jobs for their neighbors. Babysitting, walking dogs, dog walking, washing cars, etc. In general, they depend on the generosity of their parents for their money. The amount that they receive varies with age, report cards, and the economic situation of the family. They also receive some money from their family and their godfathers and godmothers for special occasions. Christmas, New Year's Day, and birthday. Here is how much money young French people have on average. 2 to 7 years old, €5 per month. 8 to 14 years old, €15 per month. 15 to 17 years old, €100 per month. Again, remember, our book is about 20 years old. So the kind of difference between the United States and France with this is a French teenager's job is to do well in school. And so typically they don't have jobs that they go to on a regular basis. They might do little jobs like they describe here, the babysitting, walking dogs, washing some cars or something from time to time. But typically they don't have an after-school type job or weekend job that they go to on a regular basis. Because getting good grades and doing well in school is important to French families. All right, vocabulaire, l'argent, so vocabulary related to money. Nom, which are nouns, okay? L'argent, and the N means that it's masculine. Un billet and une pièce. Adjectif, so these are adjectives. Riche versus pauvre. Verb, dépenser, gagner, and payer. These are all regular ER verbs. And then some expressions. Combien with a verb for how much. Combien de for a noun for how much or how many. Avoir besoin de with a noun or an infinitive or verb to talk about what you need or have to do. Avoir envie de, again, want or feel like want to do. And verbs like payer, the end in yer, have the following stem change. The y becomes an I in the je to il pluriel form. So again, what we're talking about here is the boot. Okay. So, s'il vous plaît, répétez l'argent, l'argent, un billet, une pièce, riche, riche, pauvre, pauvre, dépenser, dépenser. Je n'aime pas dépenser mon argent. Gagner, gagner. Je gagne $10 par jour. Tu joues bien. Tu vas gagner le match. Payer, payer. Qui va payer aujourd'hui? If we pause for just a moment there from our repeating and take a look at these sentences really quickly and what they mean, right? So the top one, the dépenser sentence means, I don't like to spend my money. The first gagner sentence means, I earn $10 per day. The second gagner sentence means, you play well. You are going to win the game. In the payer sentence, who is going to pay today? S'il vous plaît, répétez combien, combien, combien coûte cette chaîne hi-fi, combien de, combien de, combien d'argent as-tu, combien de CD as-tu, Avoir besoin de. Avoir besoin de. J'ai besoin de $5. J'ai besoin de travailler. Avoir envie de. Avoir envie de. J'ai envie d'une pizza. J'ai envie de manger. Again, looking at those sentences. How much does this stereo cost is the first one. How much money do you have? How many CDs do you have? I need $5. I need to work. I want a pizza. I want to eat. So we're just going to kind of review these regular ER verbs. So dépenser means to spend. Remember to conjugate my regular ER verbs. I take my infinitive, I take off my ER, which gives me my stem, and my stem's going to be in all the forms of my verb. And I add an E for je. I add an ES for to. I add an E for il or el singular. I add an ONS for new. I add an EZ for il and el or for vous. And I add an ENT for il and el pluriel. Remember, only 3 different pronunciations. S'il vous plaît, répétez dépenser. Je dépense. Tu dépenses. Elle dépense. Nous dépensons. Vous dépensez. Elle dépense. Gagner, which means to earn or to win. Again, same thing. My stem's going to be in all of the forms of my verb, and I add my E for je. I add my ES for to. I add my E for il or el. I add my ONS for new. I add my EZ for il and el pluriel. And I add my ENT for il and el pluriel. So s'il vous plaît, répétez gagner. Je gagne. Tu gagnes. Il gagne. Nous gagnons. Vous gagnez. Il gagne. Lastly, we have payer, which means to pay or to pay for. Now, this one we do have to remember that our Y is going to change to an I in our boot. Okay. Again, here's my stem, the PAY, but it changes to an I here, and then I add my E. Changes to an I here, I add my ES. Changes to an I here, I add an E. Here it's going to be the Y, so it's PAYONS. Here it's going to stay the Y, so it's going to be PAYEZ. And in the il and el pluriel, again, it's going to change to an I and be an ENT on the end. S'il vous plaît, répétez payer, je paie, tu paies, il paie, nous payons, vous payez, il paie. You also have learned avoir previously, but we saw it in these couple expressions of avoir besoin de and avoir envie de. So it's a good idea to make sure you remember how to conjugate avoir. Avoir is j'ai, tu as, il, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, and il or elle pluriel ont. S'il vous plaît, répétez avoir, j'ai, Tu as, il a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont. So again, these are all verbs that you should be able to conjugate. So we're going to take a look at exercise 3 au restaurant. The following students are in a restaurant in Quebec. Say what they feel like buying and estimate how much money they need. So these are two sentences, right? Our first sentence is going to use an avoir envie de expression. Our second one is going to use an avoir besoin de and talk about how much money we need. So I'd like you to do these out loud, okay? And then you'll listen for confirmation. So numéro 1, Marc and un sandwich. Marc a envie d'un sandwich. Il a besoin de $4. 2, nous et une glace. Nous avons envie d'une glace. Nous avons besoin de $2. 3, moi and un soda. J'ai envie d'un soda. J'ai besoin de $2. Numéro 4, toi, un jus d'orange. Tu as envie d'un jus d'orange. Tu as besoin de $2. Numéro 5, vous et une salade. Vous avez envie d'une salade. Vous avez besoin de $7. Et 6, mes copains en steak. Mes copains ont envie d'un steak. Ils ont besoin de $10. All right, so moving on to what is new information in this lesson. We have a new subject pronoun on. So the other subject pronouns that you've already learned are je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle. So these are all the subject pronouns that you have already learned. And so today we're adding a new one, which is the subject pronoun on. On is kind of weird in that we don't have an equivalent of it in English. On is used in general statements. And it typically translates as one, they, we, people, okay? So it's kind of weird that it can mean so many different things depending upon your sentence. What is really important though is on is conjugated with verbs like il and elle singular. So if I want to say that one swims, it'd be on and nage, because again I use my stem and I add an e. If I want to say one finishes, here's my stem for finir and I add an it. So even if we're kind of making on mean we or they or people, it still always is conjugated with verbs like the il or the elle singular form. So that's the subject pronoun on. We are going to learn a new regular verb today. So today, again, we're going to kind of review that when we are conjugating regular verbs, we start with our infinitive and we can kind of just say our ending here, right? In ER verbs, the ending that we lose is ER. In IR verbs, the ending we lose is the IR. That gives us our stem. And then to the stem we add, okay? So again, we're talking about what we add. And again, we just reviewed this with these regular ER verbs when we looked at dépenser and payer, right? We add an E for je, an ES for tu, Now, again, notice I've added on here. We add an E. For nous, we add ONS. For vous, we add EZ. And for il and el pluriel, we add ENT. Remember here, GER verbs, we do add EONS. For IR verbs, we still start with our infinitive, take off our IR to give us our stem, and then to the stem we add, if our subject is je, we add an IS. If our subject is tu, we add an IS. If our subject is il, el, or on, we're going to add an IT. For nous, we add the ISSONS. For vous, we add the ISSEZ. And for il and el pluriel, we add the ISSENT. Okay, so those are the regular verbs we've already learned. Remember, regular was nice because there was a pattern. And we just have to follow the pattern to conjugate new verbs. The third category of regular verbs in French are regular RE verbs. We're still going to do the same thing. So we're going to start with our infinitive, which again is the form that we find in the glossary of our book, in a dictionary, on a vocabulary list, right? That's always the infinitive form. We're still going to take off our ending, which is our RE this time, which gives us our stem. And the same thing, to our stem, we're going to add, depending upon what the subject of our sentence is. Now, for je, we add an S. For tu, we add an S. Here I'm just going to put nothing. So this one is a little bit different because for il, el, or on, it's just the stem with nothing added to it. For nous, we add ONS. For vous, we add EZ. And for il and el pluriel, we add ENT. Right? So there's some similarities between all of these forms. So an example is the verb perdre, which means to lose or waste. So again, my stem is the PERD. So that stem's going to be in all of the forms of my verb. And then I add an S for je. Here's my stem. I add an S for tu. For il, el, or on, it's just my stem. Remember, I'm not going to add anything. For nous, here's my stem. I add ONS. For vous, here's my stem. I add EZ. And here's my stem. And I'm going to add my ENT. In terms of pronunciation, s'il vous plaît, répétez perdre, je perds, tu perds, on perd, nous perdons, vous perdez, ils perdent. So we don't hear the D's, okay, in the singular forms, but in the plural forms we do. So this is our final category of regular ER verbs. And again, this is another pattern verb. And our pattern, okay, is this pattern right here. Okay, this is how we conjugate these verbs. So taking a look at this information, the way it's presented to you in your textbook, à la page 288, le pronom on. Note the use of the subject pronoun on in the sentences below. Qu'est-ce qu'on vend ici? Où est-ce qu'on achète ce CD? En France, on parle français. The pronoun on is used in general statements according to the construction. On is conjugated like the il or el form of the verb. So, on travaille beaucoup can mean quite a few different things. It can mean one works a lot, they work a lot, you work a lot, or people work a lot. There is liaison after on when the next word begins with a vowel sound. Est-ce qu'on invite Stephanie à la boum? Okay, are we inviting Stephanie to the party? In conversation, on is often used instead of nous. Est-ce qu'on dîne à la maison? No, on va au restaurant. So again, on is, we don't really have an equivalent of it in English, but in French you just need to remember that it's conjugated like the il and the l singular form of the verb. So we have an expression pour la conversation, how to indicate approval. S'il vous plaît, répétez c'est une bonne idée. C'est une bonne idée. C'est une bonne idée. So exercice 7 en Amérique et en France. An American student and a French student are comparing certain aspects of life in their own countries. Play both roles. So we have jouer au baseball and au foot. So in parentheses is what they do in France. Here's what they do in the US, according to your textbook. And so we're going to make statements like that. So we have en Amérique, on joue au baseball. En France, on joue au foot. So remember, we're going to use on every time, which means we're going to use our il or l singular form of our verb. So the en Amérique stays the same every time, and the on. And the en France and on stays the same every time in the second sentence. So again, I'd like you to say these out loud. So numéro 1, parler anglais and français. En Amérique, on parle anglais. En France, on parle français. 2, étudier le français, l'anglais. En Amérique, on étudie le français. En France, on étudie l'anglais. 3. Dîner à 6 heures, à 8 heures. En Amérique, on dîne à 6 heures. En France, on dîne à 8 heures. 4. Manger des hamburgers, des omelettes. En Amérique, on mange des hamburgers. En France, on mange des omelettes. 5. Voyager souvent en avion, en train. En Amérique, on voyage souvent en avion. En France, on voyage souvent en train. Numéro 6. Skier dans le Colorado, dans les Alpes. En Amérique, on skie dans le Colorado. En France, on skie dans les Alpes. Numéro 7. Aller à l'école le mercredi après-midi, le samedi matin. En Amérique, on va à l'école le mercredi après-midi. En France, on va à l'école le samedi matin. 8. Chanter la bannière étoilée et la Marseillaise. En Amérique, on chante la bannière étoilée. En France, on chante la Marseillaise. So that's like France's national anthem. B. Les verbes réguliers en RE. Many French verbs end in RE. Most of these are conjugated like vendre, to sell. Note the forms of the verb in the present tense, paying special attention to the endings. S'il vous plaît, répétez vendre, je vends, tu vends, on vend, nous vendons, vous vendez, elles vendent. S'il vous plaît, répétez je vends ma raquette. Tu vends ton scooter. On vend son ordinateur. Nous vendons nos livres. Vous vendez vos CD. Elles vendent leur voiture. Working through the translation of those. I sell my racket. You sell your scooter. One sells his or her computer. We sell our books. You sell your CDs. They sell their car. Again, over here we see, right, those endings that we add to our stem. The D of the stem is silent in the singular forms, but it is pronounced in the plural forms. Vocabulaire, verbe régulier and RE. S'il vous plaît, répétez attendre. Attendre. Pierre attend Michel au café. Entendre. Entendre. Est-ce que tu entends la radio? Perdre. Perdre. Jean-Claude perd le match. Rendre visite à. Rendre visite à. Je rends visite à mon oncle. Répondre à. Répondre à. Nous répondons à la question du prof. Vendre. Vendre. À qui vends-tu ton vélo? There are two French verbs that correspond to the English verb to visit. You use visiter, which is a regular ER verb, when you're talking about places. And you use rendre visite à when you talk about people. S'il vous plaît, répétez, nous visitons Québec. Nous rendons visite à nos cousins canadiens. Working through the translation of these sentences, we have Pierre waits for Michel at the cafe. Do you hear the radio? Jean-Claude lost or loses the game. I visit my uncle. We answer the teacher's question. To whom are you selling your bike? We visit Quebec. We visit our Canadian cousins. Look at exercice 9, rendezvous. The following people have been shopping and are now waiting for their friends at a cafe. Express this using the appropriate forms of the verb attendre. So again, the first part of this is the subject of our sentence. Next, we're going to conjugate attendre. And then this is the end of our sentence. So we have Jérôme attend Michel. So again, I'd like you to say these. Numéro 1, nous attendons nos copains. Numéro 2, vous attendez vos cousines. Toi, j'attends Antoine. Numéro 4. Tu attends Julie. 5. Olivier et Eric attendent Elodie et Sophie. 6. Les étudiants attendent les étudiantes. 7. Julienne et moi, nous attendons Pauline et Mélanie. 8. Annette et toi, vous attendez Jean-Marc. 9. On attend notre copine. 10. Stéphanie attend Lia. We'll do one more exercise out loud here. Exercice 11. Qu'est-ce qu'ils font? Say what the following people do by completing each sentence with the appropriate form of one of the verbs from the list. Be logical. So this is a two-part exercise. Part number 1, which verb goes in the sentence? Step number 2, conjugate that verb. And the first sentence is there so that you can decide, right? Numéro 1, Guillaume est patient. So Guillaume is patient. So he's something his friends. Well, if he's patient, he's probably waiting for his friends. So il attend ses amis. So 2, vous êtes à Paris. Vous rendez visite à vos cousins français. Numéro 3, tu joues mal. Tu perds le match. Numéro 4, je suis chez moi. J'entends un bruit curieux. 5, nous sommes en classe. Nous répondons aux questions du professeur. 6, Julie travaille dans une boutique. Elle vend des robes. 7, on est au café. On attend nos copains. So your homework, exercise 3, again, we did this one out loud. Again, you have to estimate the price, and this is using the verb avoir. So like for number 1, okay, Marc a envie d'un sandwich. And then depending on how much you think a sandwich is, il a besoin de $10. So I think maybe he needs $10 for sandwich. Okay, so you're going to write out 2 sentences like that. The first one's always going to use avoir envie de. The second sentence will always use avoir besoin de. And you're conjugating avoir. Exercise 7. Again, we also did this one out loud. To save yourself a little writing, you can leave out the en Amérique and you can just start both of your sentences with on. Okay, so number 1 would be on parle anglais. On parle français. Okay, so you're going to write out those 2 sentences. Remember, all of these verbs for own are conjugated like the il or el singular form. And exercise 9, we also did this one out loud. Here you're using that new verb attendre, and you're conjugating it. So for number 1, you would write nous attendons nos copains. So you're writing out those sentences for the 10 of them. Au revoir, à demain.